Imagine being in a small, quiet town, where everyone knows each other, until a mystery arises in its darkest nights. Sheriff Leonard, a man who lives to protect his daughter and seek justice, begins to see something inexplicable. A black girl who appears every night next to Pump 3 at a gas station. Every time he goes near her, she disappears, leaving a feeling of anguish in the air that takes over him and the town. The mystery of this presence begins to shake the foundations of his life, bringing old secrets to light and testing the limits of his courage and resilience. Who is this girl? What does she want? And how far will Leonard go to understand this enigma that haunts him? If this story captivated you and you were curious to know the outcome, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment on what you thought. That first night, I was alone on patrol. It was the kind of night when the entire city seemed to go to sleep earlier, with darkened windows, empty streets, and only the sound of the wind cutting through the silence. There was a faint mist, almost invisible, spreading along the main road, reflecting the few lights from the street lamps. A kind of calm that, somehow, felt more like a warning than an invitation to peace. The town's gas station was right on the outskirts, an old building with a faded facade and half-lit signs. It had a somber charm, as if it had been there long before any of the residents were born. And on nights like that, the place looked almost like a movie set, with peeling paint, rusty pumps, and the flickering reflections of the lights in the fog. Something there gave me chills, though I'd never stopped to think about why. I parked the patrol car beside the station, preparing for another routine check, but as soon as I got out of the car, I noticed something strange. Next to pump number 3, there was a girl standing, motionless, looking in my direction. She was young, maybe around 20, dark-skinned, with curly hair tied in a tight bun. She wore a white dress, something simple with no great detail, but it contrasted with the darkness around her. Her eyes were the first thing that set me on alert. Large, intense, almost inhuman. I thought maybe she was waiting for someone or that her car had broken down. "Are you okay?" I asked with a firm voice, trying to sound friendly. She didn't respond. She just kept looking. And that started to unsettle me. I, the town sheriff, used to dealing with tense and problematic situations, felt disconcerted by a silent, standing girl. "Look, if you need help, I'm here. You don't have to be afraid," I insisted, taking a step toward her. That's when something strange happened. When my feet moved outside the car, the sound of my steps seemed to echo more than usual, as if the entire night was absorbing the sound, making it deeper and the silence heavier. The girl stared at me with an intensity that's hard to describe. It wasn't the kind of frightened or lost look I'd see in someone in distress. It was a dark look. There was a weight there, as if she were hiding something. That alert feeling I'd had when I first saw her quickly turned into an anxiety rising in my chest. I took another step and she began to move away. Her movements were slow, almost hesitant, as if she were trying to measure each step she took. "Wait," I called, moving closer, but she kept backing away. Then, as I approached the pump, she suddenly turned and began walking toward the darker side of the station, where the light didn't reach. "Hey, I just want to talk," I called out again, but something inside me already knew she wouldn't answer. It was as if she wanted me to follow her. That idea, as strange as it was unsettling, felt reasonable at the time, and I followed. As I got closer to where she was, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, but I could still only see her silhouette moving further and further away. When I reached the end of the station, I could already feel cold sweat on my forehead, and my breathing was heavier than it should have been. That's when she stopped, suddenly. She was now a few meters away from me, beside an old brick wall, leaning as if waiting for something or someone. She looked at me again, and this time there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. A sadness so deep it hurt just to look at it. Do you need help? I can take you home or somewhere safe." My voice came out lower than I intended, almost like a whisper, as fear and curiosity wrestled for control over my words. She remained silent, and the frustration mixed with fear was beginning to bother me. Everything I knew about this job was telling me to leave, to turn around and forget I'd seen anything. But at the same time, I felt she was there for a reason. And then, just as I thought of approaching, she disappeared. In the blink of an eye, without a sound, without any movement. The place where she'd stood was empty, as if she'd never been there. I stood frozen, with my breath caught and my heart racing, wondering if I had really seen what I thought I had seen. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "This doesn't make sense," I murmured to myself, trying to gather any logic that could justify what had just happened. I started walking around the station, looking behind the pumps, the light panel, anything that could explain her disappearance. But there was nothing. No trace, no sign that anyone had been there. I got back to the patrol car with a mix of sensations I couldn't identify. It was as if her presence was still there, somehow lingering in the air, and a part of me knew this wouldn't end there. I sat in the car and stared at the station for a few more minutes, searching for an answer that simply wouldn't come. That night, when I finally went home, I carried her image with me. The white dress, the deep, sad eyes, her silence that seemed to guard a darker truth than I could imagine. No matter how much I tried to forget, that image wouldn't leave me in peace. A part of me knew it wasn't a mere coincidence that somehow that girl wanted to be seen. After that first night, I found myself in a state I had never experienced before. I couldn't get that girl out of my head. Her features, the deep eyes, and that enigmatic look that seemed to call for help without saying a word. It was as if her silence had clung to me. Every solitary moment reminded me of that night at the station. The next day, arriving at the station, I still couldn't focus. It seemed absurd, but something made me doubt whether I had really seen that girl or if my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe fatigue was affecting me more than I realized. She couldn't have simply vanished into thin air, I thought, trying to find a logical point amidst the confusion. When I finally sat at my desk to start the routine work, I was interrupted by Donnie, one of the assistants at the station. He came up to me with a serious look and crossed arms, as if he was about to report a crime. "Sheriff, do you know about the girl?" he began in a low, almost conspiratorial tone. The question made me frown. "What girl?" I tried to play it off, not wanting to seem like I knew anything. "That one from the gas station. Some neighbors said they saw her. It seems she's been hanging around there at night," he replied, looking at me with wide eyes, as if he were narrating an urban legend. Inside, a chill ran through me. I wasn't the only one who had seen her? Other people too? It brought me a strange mix of relief and dread. If others had seen her, then I wasn't crazy, but it also meant that this mystery was spreading more than I'd imagined. Gradually, I heard reports from more people. Throughout the day, someone would always mention having seen the girl. A truck driver passing down the road late at night said she was at the station, standing by pump number 3 as if she were waiting for something. He even mentioned that he tried to offer her a ride, but she just stood there, unmoving, as if she hadn't even heard him. Another person, Mrs. Ruth, whom I'd known since I was a kid, came to the station one day, her face pale and hands trembling. She told me that the previous night, as she was returning from a visit to her daughter's house, she saw the girl standing by the roadside, not far from the station. She said that for a moment she thought about stopping, but the girl's gaze gave her such a strong chill that she decided to keep driving. "Leonard, there's something wrong with that girl, I'm telling you," Mrs. Ruth insisted, holding onto my arm, her eyes filled with a worry that wasn't common for someone like her, who had always been brave. "It's not normal for someone to be standing there in the middle of the night with that empty look. I've never seen such deep sadness in anyone's eyes." Each account hit me like a blow. With every new story, it seemed that the girl's presence grew stronger, like a shadow stretching across the entire town. Soon, the gas station became the main topic among the residents. People speculated, made up theories. Some said she was a lost soul, a young woman who died on that road and got stuck there, reliving her last moments. Others believed she was someone from out of town, maybe someone with mental issues who needed help. But no one had a definitive explanation. On the following nights, I made it a point to patrol the station area. I wouldn't admit it to myself, but I was trying to see her again. Every time I parked the car there, turning on the headlights, I hoped to find that familiar figure with the white dress and the empty look. But for several nights I saw nothing. Everything was calm as usual, the wind rustling the leaves of the surrounding trees, the sound of insects filling the silence. That calm seemed to mock me, as if it had all been just a delusion. Then, on one of the patrol nights, while checking the main street, I decided to stop at the only cafe that was still open. The place was modest, with wooden tables and a decor that seemed unchanged since the 80s. I was lost in thought when I heard Jack, the cafe owner, talking about the girl. He was talking to some customers. The way he was telling the story seemed even more haunting when I noticed the low, cautious tone of his voice. "I'm telling you, she's real. I saw her with my own eyes the other night. She was there, standing in the middle of the station, looking straight at me. And there was something about her that isn't from this world," he said, with a firmness that was impossible to ignore. I couldn't resist and approached. "Jack, did you see her too?" I asked, trying to keep a casual tone, though my curiosity was evident. Jack looked back at me, eyebrows raised, clearly surprised. "Yes, I did, Sheriff. And I'll tell you this, I've never felt so scared in my life. Those eyes, it's like she was asking for help, and at the same time, it was as if she already knew she wouldn't get any help. We all fell silent. This was a small town, where fear didn't usually seep into our daily conversations. But there was something different about this situation. Jack was a tough man, a war veteran, someone who didn't scare easily. If he was telling this story seriously, it was because there was, indeed, something more to that girl. Each witness, each story, it was like a puzzle forming, but the pieces just didn't seem to fit. The girl's presence was becoming a kind of urban legend, but I knew there was something real there, something I couldn't just ignore. More and more, the question of who she was and what kept her at that station began to consume me. And so, each night, I felt the mystery deepen around me. The restless nights started affecting me in ways I'd never imagined. It wasn't just the mystery of that girl, but the way my own mind seemed to work against me. Gradually, I realized I was losing control over my thoughts and, in a way, over my life. And, of course, it started affecting how I interacted with Kayla, my wife. Kayla had always been my safe harbor, the place where I felt at peace, the home I could always return to. When we finally got some time together, she would sit beside me on the couch, holding my hand, smiling with that look of someone who knows me better than I know myself. She noticed, of course, that I was distant. In fact, I could see in her eyes that she knew more than I was saying. That particular night, I was at home after a long patrol and trying to avoid any mention of what had been happening. The silence between us was tense, and I knew it wouldn't last. I sat there, staring at the TV, not really watching anything, while my mind was still at the station, on the girl, on the silent looks that seemed to haunt me. It was as if she were there, even if invisible, watching me with those deep eyes. Finally, Kayla broke the silence. "Leonard, what's going on?" Her voice was calm but firm, with the precision of someone who knows exactly where to press to get an answer. She moved closer, and I felt her hand on my shoulder, gentle but determined. "I know you. I know something's keeping you up at night." I hesitated for a moment, my mind trying to find a way to explain without really having to tell her. I wanted to protect Kayla. I didn't want her to carry the weight of this dark mystery that was growing in town. But at the same time, I knew hiding things from her wasn't the answer. And besides, I needed to open up to someone. I couldn't carry it all alone anymore. "It's complicated, Kayla. I don't even know if I can explain it properly," I began, feeling the weight of the words. "There's this girl, the whole town is talking about her. She appears at the gas station at night. Standing there without speaking to anyone. It's like she's lost, but in a way I can't explain." She frowned, trying to process what I was saying. "A girl? Leonard, are you telling me you're scared because of a girl who hangs around the station? Maybe it's just someone going through a rough time, someone who needs help?" I thought of that, but it's different. The words seemed stuck, as if they resisted coming out. I felt vulnerable, and it bothered me. "She's not just any ordinary girl, Kayla. Something about her doesn't make sense. And more people are seeing the same thing." She looked at me in silence for a long time, and I sensed she was trying to figure out if this was just fatigue or if I truly believed what I was saying. And to be honest, I didn't know anymore what or whom to believe. "Leonard, have you considered that maybe it's all just stress? You've been working too much, taking extra shifts, dealing with," she hesitated but finished, "with whatever it is you think you saw." I felt a pang of irritation, an impulse that I knew wasn't fair, but I couldn't hold it back. "I know what I saw, Kayla. I'm not a man of stories. But believe me that," I sighed, trying to find the right word. "That isn't normal. I feel it here." I touched my chest, trying to give form to the feeling I'd been carrying. "I know it sounds crazy, but it's like she's trying to tell me something, calling me to solve something." Kayla looked away, as if she needed a moment to process what I was saying. I saw the concern on her face, mixed with an expression that bordered on fear. Perhaps for the first time she was afraid of me. "Leonard, do you really think this girl is something we don't understand?" She spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Because if you think that's true, then maybe you need to talk to someone about it. It wouldn't be the first time someone in this position starts to." She paused, reluctant to finish the thought. She would never see me as weak, but it was clear she was beginning to worry. Her reaction made my stomach turn. I knew what she was trying to suggest, and it bothered me deeply. I wasn't crazy, I knew what I had seen. But how could I convince her of that? How could I explain something that even I couldn't understand? "I don't think it's just in my head, Kayla." My voice came out softer than I intended, almost a whisper. "It's like," I looked at the floor, searching for the words. "It's like she's real and at the same time, not. I can't explain it. But I need to keep going to the station. I need to understand who she is and what she wants." She sighed, running her hand over her face, clearly worried. "I just want you to be careful, Leonard. I don't know what you believe in, but I feel like this is consuming you and I don't want to lose you to this thing. I knew she was right, but there was a voice inside me saying that this was important. That this girl wasn't just an illusion or a misunderstanding. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt an anxiety that was turning into anguish. Was I really losing control? And if it was just exhaustion? Or worse, what if I had become vulnerable to something I couldn't even explain? That night, I lay beside Kayla, but sleep didn't come. My mind kept spinning, replaying every detail of that first night, every account I had heard. Her face, the empty eyes, it was as if she was infiltrating my thoughts, a persistent and disturbing presence. Somehow, I knew that even without knowing her name, she had a bond with me. As if I were the only person who could understand what she wanted, or needed. For the first time in my life, I felt small before something I couldn't comprehend. The nights dragged on and I couldn't stop thinking about the girl at the station. The town, with its murmurs, was beginning to revolve around this mystery. Fear and anxiety became constant companions, like shadows that never left. Each time I drove to the gas station, a knot formed in my stomach. It was as if I was heading toward an abyss, drawn by a call I couldn't understand. It was on one of those nights, when the stars hid behind heavy clouds, that I decided to stop by the station to talk to Carly. She owned the place, and although we only knew each other superficially, there was something about her presence that made me feel she knew more than she let on. Carly had this aura of someone who carried the weight of many secrets, and in moments like that, I needed someone who might understand what was happening. When I arrived, I found Carly behind the counter, wiping the shelves with a cloth that seemed older than me. When she looked up, I saw an expression that mixed worry with something like skepticism. "Leo, you don't look well," she said, setting the cloth aside. "What's going on with you?" The question caught me by surprise and I hesitated before responding. Part of me wanted to be honest, but at the same time, there was a deep fear of how this might be interpreted. "I'm just tired, Carly. You know how it is." I tried to avoid her gaze, focusing on a soda bottle on the shelf. "The work is tough and these night shifts don't help." She crossed her arms, studying me with a keen look. "No, Leo. This is more than exhaustion. You have no idea how much I worry about you. The whole town is talking about that girl." Carly paused, her gaze becoming intense. "There's something strange about this place. What are you trying to find here?" I felt the pressure in my forehead, as if every word of hers was pressing a button inside me. What was I trying to find? That question echoed in my mind, but I didn't have a clear answer. It was as if the search was guiding me without me really knowing why. "I don't know. I just see her every night. And I feel there's something more," I confessed, my voice faltering as I tried to articulate my thoughts. "It's like I'm the only one noticing, and that torments me." Carly stepped closer, her eyes scanning the space around us as if she wanted to make sure no one else was listening. "You need to be careful, Leo. There are stories about this place that you may not know." She hesitated, looking at the door as if she expected someone to come in. "This station has an old history and not all the stories are good." A chill ran down my spine and I couldn't help but sigh. The feeling that there was something more, something hidden beneath the surface, intensified. "What kind of stories?" I asked, curiosity overriding my instinct to protect myself. What could be so terrifying about a simple gas station? But Carly's look told me it was much more complex. "Have you ever heard of the Path of Shadows?" Carly began, her tone laden with mystery. "It's an old legend that circulates around here. They say that on nights like this, spirits wander in search of something lost. Those who don't respect the place's history end up lost as well. And the girl you're seeing, she might be one of those souls." I felt my heart race, the connection between what she was saying and what I felt gaining strength. The stories I had ignored, the ones that seemed like mere urban legends, now felt more real than ever. "So you're saying she's a spirit?" I couldn't believe what I was saying, but something inside me made perfect sense. "How can I be sure of that?" Carly shook her head, her eyes full of concern. "You can't. No one can. But it's dangerous to ignore the stories. There's something about that girl that ties her to the past, and you, as the sheriff, need to be cautious. Don't let this consume you. Go away, Leo." Her words resonated in my mind, creating an echo that seemed to multiply with each breath. There was no way to ignore what was happening. I couldn't simply walk away. Something in me was being pulled by a greater force, and that force was tied to the girl. "I can't. I need to find out who she is and what she wants from me," I declared, with a determination that, to my surprise, sounded true. "I can't just leave this behind." Carly looked at me and I saw a mix of compassion and despair in her eyes. "Just be careful, Leo. Don't let yourself be carried away by this obsession. What's at stake might be deeper than you imagine. I left the station that night with a head full of questions and a heavy heart. Carly's warnings echoed in my mind, but at the same time, the desire to understand the mystery of the girl grew within me. What did she want? And why me? With the weight of old stories and unrevealed secrets hanging over me, I knew I was about to enter unknown territory, a path where curiosity and fear walked side by side. The shadows of that night seemed denser, as if the darkness itself was enveloping me, and I knew that the answer to what I was searching for was closer than I imagined. Whatever was happening, I had to uncover it. The next morning arrived with pale light filtering through the curtains of my house. I had slept poorly, surrounded by thoughts and images of the girl at the station. What was I getting myself into? The unease consumed me, and the urge to understand this mystery was becoming increasingly irresistible. I could barely contain the curiosity driving me to investigate what had happened on the deserted roads of my town. After a quick breakfast, I headed to the station, where the routine was usually monotonous, marked by calls about trivial issues. However, that day carried a different weight, as if I were about to uncover something that would change everything. Upon entering the office, the fluorescent light illuminated the disordered papers, and a sinking feeling in my stomach reminded me of the conversations I'd had with Carly. The idea of diving into the old police records didn't appeal to me, but I needed to understand what was going on. Sifting through dusty boxes and outdated files, I began flipping through the records of disappearances. The smell of aged paper filled my nostrils, and the printed words seemed to tell stories of interrupted lives. Each turned page was a new shock, revealing devastated families, broken hearts, and unresolved mysteries. The coldness of the numbers and dates made me feel an emotional connection, almost as if each of those souls were begging me not to let them be forgotten. After what felt like an eternity, one file caught my attention. The disappearance of a young woman, described as a black girl, had occurred more than 10 years ago on the same road where the gas station was located. Her name was Eva, and the last time anyone saw her was on the night of a local festival, when she said she was heading to a party in town. But Eva never arrived. No one ever bothered to properly investigate. The file was marked as a closed case with no new developments. The injustice of this neglect left me deeply shaken. How could someone simply disappear and be forgotten? A wave of empathy hit me, and the connection I felt with the girl at the station intensified. Eva wasn't just a lost memory, she was somehow calling to me. What happened to her? And why hadn't her disappearance received the attention it deserved? I needed answers. I got up determined and went back to Carly's place. Not just to seek solace but to find out if there was more information about Eva. The atmosphere inside the station was more tense than the last time. Carly greeted me with a look that mixed apprehension and expectation. "Leo, you look different today." "What happened?" she asked, placing her hands on her hips, as if bracing for a serious conversation. "I found something." My eyes locked onto hers, full of determination. "A girl named Eva disappeared here years ago. She was black and vanished on the same road. I can't believe no one investigated." Carly frowned, and the shadow of the past seemed to cross her gaze. "I knew there was something, but I never thought you'd find it." She took a deep breath as if weighing her words. "You know, I heard that a black girl went missing on that road years ago, but no one wanted to investigate. It was as if no one cared. Just another lost life among so many." A chill ran down my spine. It was as if Carly were shedding light on something I'd already suspected, but which now became clearer. There was a pattern in how people were treated, and Eva, like so many others, had become a statistic, an echo in the town's silence. But why? How could this happen? I demanded, my tone reflecting a mix of indignation and pain. "How can we let this keep happening?" Carly looked away, her face carrying the expression of someone who had witnessed injustices throughout her life but felt powerless to change the system. "I don't know, Leo. We just live in a place where some lives don't seem to matter as much. It's painful, but it's the truth. I've always believed that if you looked at their faces, you'd see not just numbers but stories. Stories that need to be told." Her words echoed in my mind, and a new determination grew within me. It wasn't just a matter of finding out what happened to Eva, it was about reversing this narrative. The town needed to remember her, and more importantly, it needed to remember that every life mattered. "I'm going to find out the truth about Eva. I can't let this go," I affirmed, my voice laden with emotion. Carly watched me, a glimmer of hope mixed with concern in her eyes. "Then you'll need help. It's not an easy task and you can't do it alone. There are people in town who know the story. Talking to them may lead you to more clues." This idea ignited a new spark in me. The town might be a maze of secrets, but if there were people willing to share the stories hidden within, I was ready to listen. The connection I felt with Eva was getting stronger, and I realized that I wasn't just seeking answers, I was fighting for justice. In that moment, a new mission formed in my mind. The shadows on that road would no longer hide. With Carly's help and anyone else who could collaborate, I would begin to trace a path toward the truth, a truth that could not be ignored. The nights I spent at the gas station would no longer be merely an echo of mystery, they would become the start of a journey that would require courage and determination. It was time to act, and I could not hesitate. The day had turned into night when I returned home, my heart still pounding with the adrenaline of the revelation. There was an urgency in me that drove me to dive deeper into Eva's story, and I could still feel the warmth of the determination Carly had ignited. But what I didn't expect was that the tension from that day would take a more personal turn as soon as I crossed the door. As I entered, I noticed the living room was silent, but there was something in the atmosphere that seemed to carry weight. Kayla was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes fixed on a set of documents I had left there. I couldn't avoid the wave of anxiety that washed over me when I saw the papers. They were old records of disappearances and some photos I had found in my files. It was something I should have hidden better. "Dad, what's this?" Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but the tone of concern was clear. I could see the confusion on her face, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Who is this girl?" The question cut like a knife. I knew, somehow, this discovery was inevitable. Kayla had a way of noticing things I tried to keep hidden. In that moment, the world around me seemed to stop. Her gaze was fixed on Eva's photo, and the reality of what I was about to say hit me like a train. "It's something from my work, Kayla. Something old." My attempt to soften the words felt insufficient. What I held in my hands wasn't just a police file, it was a part of a story that wasn't mine alone, but one that also affected my daughter's life. "But why are you working on this?" Kayla pressed, curiosity shining in her eyes. I couldn't just brush off the question. Kayla deserved the truth, or at least a version of it that wouldn't scare her. The hesitation made me feel as if I were in an emotional battlefield. How could I explain that this girl represented not just a mystery but a pain, an echo of a life that had been lost and that, in some way, was connected to me? "It's an investigation into disappearances, Kayla. A young woman named Eva disappeared many years ago on the road near the gas station. I feel like we need to understand what happened to her. Many people suffered because of this, and I don't want anyone else to suffer without the truth being revealed." Kayla frowned, her expression shifting from confusion to reluctant understanding. I could see that the idea of an untold story was affecting her. It wasn't just a case. It was a life, and the gravity of that was beginning to take root in our reality. "But Dad, what does that have to do with us? Why do you care so much?" she asked, her voice tinged with a concern that reflected the weight of our family circumstances. I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to reveal a part of myself I hadn't shared before. "Eva's life is a reminder of what can happen when people are forgotten, Kayla. And this isn't just about her. The story we're writing now, it's about us too. It's about how we should look after one another and never let someone's pain get lost in the shadows." Kayla's expression turned thoughtful, and I knew she was processing every word. The fact that I was speaking about something so intense and personal felt like a necessary step, even though it was painful. "I don't want you to get hurt, Dad. These things can be dangerous. You know there are people who don't want the truth to come to light." Kayla was referring to the growing tension I was sensing in the town, as if the shadows around us were more than just a whim of the weather. "I know, but we have to do this. Not just for Eva but for all the people who feel like no one cares. I can't just stand here doing nothing when something so wrong is happening." Her eyes softened and I could see the internal struggle taking place. Kayla was always more perceptive than I gave her credit for, and even though the thought of involving her in such a complex and potentially dangerous situation worried me, I also knew she needed to understand. "Can I help?" The question came out as a whisper, and hope ignited within me. It was exactly what I wanted, but it was also a huge risk. "I don't want you to get more involved than necessary, Kayla. This is a difficult journey, and I don't want you to feel the weight of it." My response was cautious, but the determination in her gaze was undeniable. She wanted to be part of this. "But I want to. If it's important to you, then it's important to me too." The sincerity in her voice moved me. How could I refuse her offer? In that moment, I realized this wasn't just an investigation about Eva. It was an opportunity to unite our family around a cause, to show Kayla that even in dark times, we could still seek the light. "All right then. If you really want to help, let's find out more about Eva together. But we need to be careful and respect the boundaries. We can't let this consume us. Kayla nodded, and a silent understanding passed between us. The reality of this investigation wouldn't be easy, but with the connection we were building, there was a feeling of hope. The shadows surrounding us now seemed less oppressive. With my daughter by my side, the journey toward the truth became a mission not only of resolution but of rebuilding. We went outside for some fresh air, as if we needed to step away from the heaviness of what we had just shared. Kayla seemed lighter and I felt a bit more encouraged. No matter how dark the road ahead, we now knew that we'd have each other to face whatever came. The search for Eva's truth was only beginning, and together we were stronger. The following weeks were marked by a frenzy of emotions and discoveries. Kayla and I spent hours in the basement, surrounded by boxes of old documents and yellowed photos, each one telling a story that seemed hidden in the mists of time. The connection we were establishing was not only with Eva but with the town itself, a town whose secrets were intertwined in a past many preferred to forget. One afternoon, while going through incident records, we found a file that made my heart race. The document talked about a series of racist incidents that had occurred in the town during the 1960s. The tone of the report was cold and impersonal, but the words screamed of the injustice and pain those people had faced. I felt a wave of anger and sadness, especially at the thought that Eva could have been yet another victim of this legacy. "Dad, look at this," Kayla called, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and worry. She was holding an old photo, a faded image of a young woman with curly hair and intense eyes. It was like I was looking at an older version of Eva. "She looked a lot like the girl we saw, didn't she?" I commented, moving closer to examine the photo. The name on the caption read Young Eva Brooks, missing since 1965. The date made me freeze. It was the same period the documents we found mentioned the racist incidents. The connection between Eva's story and the town's history was beginning to become clearer. "What happened to her?" Kayla asked, the innocence in her voice contrasting with the weight of the question. Her gaze was fixed on the image as if trying to absorb everything. "She disappeared without a trace and no one did much to look for her. The town was wrapped up in its own problems, and a young black woman wasn't a priority." The bitterness in my words was palpable. It was impossible not to feel that this story was unfolding against a backdrop of institutionalized racism and collective apathy. Kayla was silent, processing what I had just said. The pain and injustice hanging over the town felt more real than ever. It wasn't just a missing person case, it was an echo of a society that often turned its back on those who needed help. "Dad, this can't be all. There has to be more information about what happened to her." Kayla was determined, her frustration palpable. I admired her spirit. It showed she wasn't just a teenager oblivious to the world. She wanted to understand, wanted to fight for justice. "You're right. We need to dig deeper." I took a deep breath, an idea forming in my mind. Maybe there are people in town who remember her. We need to start asking around. At that moment, a disturbing thought crossed my mind. What would happen if the truths began to emerge? The town had its past, and that past was not pretty. By reviving Eva's story, we were, perhaps unintentionally, unearthing pain and shame that many would rather keep buried. We could go to the gas station and talk to Carly again. "She knows more about the local history than she realizes," I suggested, recognizing that this was an opportunity not just to investigate but to understand the impact the past still had on the community. Kayla nodded enthusiastically, her eyes shining with newfound determination. "And what if we spoke with the older residents? They might have seen or heard something." "Yes, that might be a good idea. Let's prepare ourselves to hear some difficult stories." I knew the journey to the truth would be full of challenges, but the fact that we were together made the task feel a little lighter. As we prepared for our new mission, a sense of urgency settled in. Eva's story was not just a mystery to solve. It was a way to confront the town's past and in a way find a path to healing. This girl who appeared at night at the gas station was more than a shadow. She was a symbol of everything our town had ignored. As we left the house, the sky was beginning to darken, and the wind blew with an intensity that made the leaves dance. The shadows seemed longer and deeper, as if they were a warning that we were about to step into unknown territory. With Kayla by my side, I headed toward the station, determined to uncover not only what happened to Eva but also how this racist past still influenced our lives. "Dad, do you think if we find answers, things could change?" Kayla asked as we drove, her voice breaking the contemplative silence that surrounded us. "I hope so, Kayla. The truth can be difficult, but it's a necessary step for us to begin healing the wounds." The road ahead of us seemed endless, and in my heart, there was a mixture of hope and fear for what might be revealed. We arrived at the gas station, the bright lights seeming like a beacon in the darkness. Carly was there as always, but there was something in her gaze that suggested she knew we were ready to confront ghosts. That night would be a turning point. The search for Eva was about to intensify, and the connection between her story and the town's past would become a bridge to the truth. With renewed determination, I entered the station, ready to dig deeper and face the echoes of the past. The darkness was closing in, but I knew that the light of truth could guide us. It was time to bring Eva back into the town's memory and confront the monsters that hid beneath the surface of silence. The night enveloped the town in a dense shroud of darkness, and the only light illuminating the road was from the gas station. The wind blew fiercely, whispering ancient secrets that I was about to unearth. It was another lonely night, but I knew I wasn't alone. The girl would appear again, and this time I wouldn't run. I arrived at the station, and the lights, once inviting, now felt like a dark invitation. The place was silent, except for the distant sound of the wind, which seemed to carry the voices of the past. My mind was filled with questions, a whirlwind of insecurities and anxieties. The connection I felt with Eva grew stronger each day, and her images, her pain, were sharper in my memory. What did she want from me? Why did her presence haunt me? I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. It was time to face this specter once and for all. With hesitant steps, I approached the spot where she usually appeared. The familiar smell of gasoline and rubber mixed with the sharp cold of the night. I looked around, the tension in the air pulsing like a taut rope ready to snap. Then, like a mirage on the horizon, she appeared. Eva was there as always, wrapped in a halo of mystery and sadness. Her eyes, deep and full of pain, met mine, and a shiver ran down my spine. She seemed even more real that night, as if her emotions were raw, each one crying out for acknowledgement. Fear and sadness surrounded her like a cloak, and I felt her suffering resonate within me. "Eva?" I called, my voice sounding weaker than I intended. "What do you want from me? Tell me what I need to do." She hesitated, her intense gaze fixed on me. The wind made her hair dance, and for a moment, I wondered if the world around us had disappeared, leaving only the two of us and the weight of the past we carried. I could feel the pain emanating from her, as if her tears were trapped in a timeless space between us. "You need to listen." Her voice was barely a whisper, ethereal, as if each word were a leaf blown by the wind. "Listen to the stories that have been forgotten. You must tell them." A lump formed in my throat. What could I do? I was just a sheriff, an ordinary man trying to understand what happened to a girl I had never met. But as I looked at her face, I realized she wasn't just a tragic figure. She was a symbol, an echo of the injustices still hanging over the town. There was a responsibility in her words that I couldn't ignore. "I'm here, Eva. I'll listen to you. I promise." My heart weighed with the promise, but there was a determination that strengthened me. What I needed to do was not only to understand her pain but to help the town face the shadows that the past had cast upon it. In a surprising moment, I realized that tears were streaming down my own face. I never thought I'd see myself like this, vulnerable and exposed before a spirit. Her pain touched me in a way I couldn't explain, as if our stories were intertwined in ways I didn't yet understand. The tears fell and I couldn't stop them. "Why are you crying?" Eva asked, her voice now a distant echo, almost as if it were the town's own sadness speaking through her. "Because I feel your pain. Because I know you shouldn't be trapped here, amidst these shadows." The sincerity in my words surprised me, but I knew it was the truth. Her story couldn't be silenced. "You need to tell everyone." Her expression slowly changed between pain and hope. "What happened to the forgotten?" The urgency in her voice hit me like a punch to the gut. The weight of the past wasn't hers alone, it was all of ours. I looked at her and something inside me shifted. Those tears weren't just mine, they were an invitation to transformation. I could no longer remain on the sidelines. "I'll do it, Eva. I promise." The words came out stronger than I expected, a commitment forming within me. I didn't know how, but I knew this town needed to hear. And, more importantly, it needed to feel. Eva seemed to relax slightly, and in an instant the air around us changed. The darkness didn't feel so oppressive, and there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. It was as if, somehow, the connection we were establishing was a light in the darkness. "Thank you." The word left her lips with a sigh, as if it released a weight that held her. With that, her image began to fade, but not before I saw a glint of hope in her eyes, as if she were saying goodbye yet also asking me to continue. "Eva," I shouted, trying to pull her back. But the wind took her away, and I was alone again at the gas station, with the weight of responsibility now on my shoulders. What had just happened was more than a simple apparition. It was a calling. A mission. The connection with Eva would not be in vain, and I was determined to honor her story. I needed to do whatever it took to tell her truth. As I left the station that night, determination pulsed in my veins. It wasn't just about Eva, it was about all those who had been forgotten, whose voices were silenced by injustice. It was time to confront the town's past and ensure that no one else would have to face the darkness alone. The night was cold, but there was a new light in my heart. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready to face whatever came my way. After all, I now had a mission. And a story to tell. Dawn arrived slowly, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, but within me the weight of the previous night still lingered like a storm about to unfold. The conversation with Eva had left me with a whirlwind of feelings, a determination now turning into a burden. What I had discovered was far greater than I had imagined. Her words reverberated in my mind. You need to tell everyone. The town, with its stifled memories and forgotten stories, was asking for help, and I felt like the only one capable of hearing it. The first step was to fully understand the connection between me and that girl, but that required more than just my intuition. It was time to seek deeper answers, and I knew Carly could be the key. I drove to the gas station where Carly was already organizing the place. The morning sunlight shone on her hair, illuminating her face as she worked. It was a relief to see her. There was a strength in her that always calmed me. "Leonard, you seem different today." "What happened?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Her concern was evident, but I wasn't ready to lay it all out at once. I spoke with the girl, Carly." The words slipped from my lips like a confession. Her gaze intensified, and I knew she sensed the gravity of the situation. "I promised to tell her story." Carly nodded slowly as if processing the depth of what I had revealed. "I always knew there was something special about you, Leonard." She stepped closer, her tone becoming more serious. "But if you want to understand what's going on, you need to know the stories that were buried. The town has secrets hidden in plain sight." I felt a chill down my spine. The idea of delving into the town's dark secrets was not something I took lightly, but a greater force was pulling me in. "What do you know about the girl?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Carly hesitated but then began to speak. "Years ago, I heard a story about a young girl who disappeared. A black girl just like the one you see. But it wasn't just a tragic loss. There was something deeper, something many would prefer to forget." "What do you mean by something deeper?" My heart raced. Every word from her was like a thread of hope intertwining with the urgency of my own despair. "I believe that young woman is related to your own family, Leonard." Carly looked into my eyes, and the intensity of her gaze made me feel as if the ground were crumbling beneath my feet. "If I'm not mistaken, she is a descendant from your lineage." The shock hit me like a punch. The idea that the town's pain was somehow connected to my own past was overwhelming. Eva's story, so distant yet so close at the same time. "What do you mean?" My voice trembled, and I knew that what Carly was saying could change everything. "Long ago, a woman from your family was unjustly accused of a crime. She was one of the first to challenge the norms of this town, and her story was erased to keep the peace. Her name was Isabel. No one wanted to remember her, and with that, the story of the girl you see was lost." I was paralyzed. Isabel. The name echoed in my mind like a call from a past I never knew I had. I remembered old accounts my mother had mentioned in some of our conversations, stories I ignored, thinking they were irrelevant. It was as if an avalanche of emotions was crashing down on me, pushing me to the edge of despair. "So, Eva is part of my family?" My voice was laden with incredulity. How hadn't I realized this before? How could I have allowed the past of my own lineage to become a forgotten story? Carly stepped closer, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Leonard, this isn't just a responsibility. It's a connection you need to explore. This girl isn't here just to haunt you. She needs you to acknowledge her, to help her find peace. And you need to understand your own story because that could change everything." I looked at her, the truth of her words sinking into my heart. I felt there was an invisible line connecting Eva, Isabel, and me, a web of pain, injustice, and a search for truth. I wasn't just carrying the town's pain, I also bore a personal responsibility to this forgotten soul. "What do I do now?" I asked, the urgency in my voice revealing my need to act. The struggle was not only against Eva's memory but also against the silence that enveloped Isabel's story. Carly smiled, an expression that mixed encouragement and sadness. "You must tell her story. Face what was buried. It's time to bring the truth to light." I knew I couldn't hesitate. It was more than a mission now, it was a quest for justice, a way to honor not just Eva, but also Isabel and all those who had suffered in silence. There was a truth to be revealed, and as sheriff, my duty was to protect that truth. I took a deep breath, making the decision that would change everything. The town deserved to know, and I couldn't evade it. It was time to face the ghosts of the past and bring to light what had been silenced for so long. "I'll do it, Carly." The commitment came out of me like a declaration. "I'll give voice to Eva and Isabel, and to everyone who couldn't defend themselves. They won't be forgotten again." With renewed determination, I knew I was prepared for the next step in this journey. Their story, which had been erased and suffocated by convenience, would finally find its place. And I wouldn't rest until every fragment was revealed and honored. The sun was slowly setting on the horizon, painting the sky with a vibrant gold, but the atmosphere in the town was heavy, as if the world were about to explode in a whirlwind of emotions. I gathered all the resources I could, everything from old documents to residents' accounts. We heard stories of a past that many tried to forget. With each new testimony, the connection between Eva and Isabel became clearer, more powerful. I invited the townspeople to a meeting at the old schoolhouse, a place that had witnessed many truths being spoken and forgotten. When I arrived, the room was filled with familiar faces, some excited, others visibly hesitant. I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders, but also a burning determination. It was time to bring to light what had been buried for far too long. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice echoing off the worn wooden walls. "Today we will not only talk about the girl who appears at the gas station. We will speak about the story that connects us to her, a story that many of you know but has been silenced." Murmurs spread through the room. Resistance was present, but I wouldn't let that sway me. I continued, searching the eyes of my neighbors, trying to establish a connection. Eva is not just a lost spirit. She is the embodiment of all the voices that have been ignored in this town. And her story, just like Isabel's, deserves to be honored and remembered. We cannot allow the past to define us, but we can learn from it. As I spoke, I saw the faces change, doubt giving way to empathy. Some tears were shed. The pain was there, raw and palpable, and it was a strange yet liberating feeling. An elderly woman in the front row looked at me with shining eyes. "My father used to talk about Isabel." Her voice trembled. "I thought it was just a myth." "It's not a myth. It's a truth we need to accept," I replied, feeling my heart race. Isabel was a victim of a system that did not want to change. Her memory lives on in Eva and in all of us. We must acknowledge this and offer the peace that these souls deserve. A heavy silence settled in, but it was productive. I could feel we were on the right path. I continued recounting the stories of disappearances, injustices, the voices that had been silenced. With every word, I felt a light igniting within me. A light that illuminated not just my path but everyone's in the room. This town needs to redeem itself. "And I need you to help me," I said, looking into every face present. "Together we can restore the honor of Eva and Isabel. We can give them the recognition they deserve." A murmur of agreement began to echo, growing in intensity. Hands started to rise. People wanted to share their own stories, their own truths. When the first voice rose, the room transformed into a space of healing, a place where pain became a call to action. Carly was there, supporting me with a firm and determined gaze. I knew this fight wouldn't be easy, but the sense of unity beginning to form was undeniable. The town was ready to confront its past, and I was there to guide them. In the days that followed, discussions and investigations took over the town. We organized vigils in memory of Eva and Isabel. The community united to investigate and unearth the accounts that had remained dusty for so long. My role as sheriff transformed. It was no longer just about protecting but truly listening to and embracing the stories around us. On the night of one of those vigils, I looked up at the starry sky and felt a presence beside me. It was Eva. Her gaze was now calmer, almost at peace. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a wave of emotion. I knew that what we had done was bringing closure, not just for me but for all those impacted by her story. The wind blew softly, and a deep calm settled within me. I had honored her memory and, in some way, managed to free myself from the chains that had bound me. "You deserve more than forgetfulness," I said aloud, knowing my promise had become reality. The town was now aware of its history, a step toward healing. And I, as sheriff, was not only protecting the law but also the forgotten memories. As I watched people coming together, sharing their stories, I saw a light shining in their eyes. The legacy of Eva and Isabel finally found a home, and I was honored to be a part of it. The town not only remembered its pain but also united in a cry for justice and reconciliation. The feeling of peace was palpable, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the spiritual connection I had sought finally solidifying. The memory of the girl was no longer a whisper lost in the wind. It was a powerful echo, a call that united us all. And as I felt that connection, I knew that the path to true justice was not just about confronting the past, but about building a future where the forgotten voices would always be remembered.